part of my journey is I want to make sure that if there are people that they have this journey of like exploring their sexuality and their gender, and they happen to have been Anabaptist or Amish or Mennonite or Hutterite or Baptist, whatever, what have you not. Part of my journey is I want them to know they're not alone. There's life after that. And even if your community that you thought you had, that you thought was safe, disowns you again or shuns you again, you can still have a life after that and have a happy life.
Hi, my name's leowt, and you have found your way to the Conversations podcast. Conversations exist to create spiritually minded conversations about life. We desire to create safe space for dialogue and community. We desire to come together regularly and intentionally to generate conversations about life, belief, and the intersection of the two. Everyone is welcome at the conversation.
All right, friends, it is Leo WT. If you are here on accident, welcome. I'm Leo. You should strap in for a good time. And if you're here on purpose, thanks for coming back. I know that I'm a little bit out of sync time-wise with what I told you guys I was going to be today, but I'm here and I'm queer and I'm ready to have a great conversation with my new friends, Mary and James. If this is your first time watching Conversations, quick spiel. We come together regularly and intentionally to have spiritually minded conversations about life, belief, and the intersection of the two. There's no prerequisite to join, and everybody is welcome at the conversation. Our goal really is to be intentionally intersectional and interfaith, and you can't do that on accident. And so as part of Conversations, I've just been bringing on diverse people with diverse beliefs and having them share their stories, because one of the best ways to decolonize yourself and to de-center your narrative is to hear the narrative of others. And so I asked Mary and James to be on the show, and they were foolish enough to join me. So Mary and James are co-hosts of a podcast called Plain Rainbows, Amish and Anabaptist Stories. I missed a word in there.
Plain LGBTQ Amish and Anabaptist Stories.
Perfect. Well, since I've given you that chance to interject and correct me, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Hello, I'm Mary. I was born and raised Amish, and recently James and I were talking and we decided to create Plain Rainbows.
Yeah, Mary is like she is like the yin to my yang. We are totally in sync with each other. This has been a new creative endeavor for both of us, because this is really one of the first times that, this public conversation is happening. The intersection between, gay and Amish. I have written poetry and extensively about this, and Mary has done other podcasts about touching on the subject. However, this is really the first time that this has been brought into the public sphere like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
To add to what James said, like we really wanted to bring it out and publish it for Pride Month, because we wanted to have something for the LGBTQ community in Pride Month. And so June 1st is when you will see your first official episode. That's
so exciting, the timing of that. I feel like it's really important to have this conversation because, like you said, like it's important for Amish and Anabaptist LGBTQ people to have someone to look at and say, me too. You know what I mean? I found that even when coming out within Christendom, I was so much more able to speak my truth and to live my life once I saw someone else who was. And so what a better way to celebrate the absolute just abolitionist and protesting nature of Pride than to come out and say, like, we're here and we're Amish and queer. You know what I mean? Like, whatever that means. Like, it's not fair that you should have to come, like, even if your experience with your religion or your community is terrible, it's still your community, right? Mm-hmm. And it's still a part of your heritage, and to have people that you can speak to and share inside jokes, talk about things and not have to explain it all. That's so validating,
And
Well,
speaking of our heritage, specifically our queer heritage, I'm thinking of, it was recently Harvey Milk Day, and I was thinking of Harvey Milk, and his vision was that, all LGBTQ people, wherever they are, in whatever place they are, in whatever culture they are, can come out safely and in a
Yeah.
loving environment. That was
Mhm.
really his vision, and that includes, Amish.
Yeah.
yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wildly powerful. And I feel like, to be honest, people don't know a ton about Amish folks, right? They don't know. I was telling you guys before we started recording, but I mentioned that I was bringing a Mennonite friend on, and people were like, "Oh, I get my donuts from them. Their food is so good. They built my shed." Um, and no tea, no shade against those people. I'm not trying to pick fun at anybody, but I'm just saying, like, people don't really know much about the Anabaptist branch off of Protestantism. And I think that the further you get from Protestantism, the less educated the average American person is on the topic, because America is just so Christian first.
It's
So,
very strange when your religion is also a tourist attraction.
It's
mm,
very, very strange. It's also very strange when your religion is literally so close-minded that, like, you
yeah,
don't even talk to those people.
yeah,
Those lesbians on the corner? You don't even
yeah,
talk to them.
yeah, yeah, because they're the other, right? Like,
And yeah, they're the other. And like another thing, like you were talking about, people don't know much about the Anabaptists and the heritage. You bring up heritage, and I immediately think about this thing. Like James and I have had many conversations about this. Is all Anabaptists originated from the Catholic Church,
mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
we're all inherently Catholic.
Exactly. And
Just
people
so
aren't
y'all
trying to
know.
hear that. Yeah, like Catholic
Yeah,
meant the whole church. Like that's the meaning of the word Catholic, right? Like,
And so an interesting thing is like I actually attended a Catholic church after I got out of the Amish church,
Mhm.
and I didn't attend church anymore, and they still have some similar practices, and that's
Yeah.
the irony of it, is like they still have similar practices, and I'm like, y'all are, you're killing me here.
Yeah, you're walling out with your binary divisions and such. I feel like this is what interests me about queer theology, is the fact that we share so much common heritage, and we're all like, let me stay in this little box. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I have to ask a question, and I'm just going to toss this out to both of you folks. But for me, as part of my coming out narrative, as coming out from evangelicalism, right? I came out as a lesbian, and then I'm just such a sucker that I came out 2 more times. Like, I got to have 3 coming out stories because I'm that extra. Uh, but when I came out initially as a lesbian, I didn't know. I knew I was different, but I literally did not have the words for it because of my context. What was it like to realize your queerness within your Amish, setting? Like, what was that like? Because for me, it was really, really hard, because like I knew I was not the same, but there was no other option.
well, okay, so like for coming out, it's kind of like when we come out, that's something that we do continuously, like over and over and over again, depending on who we meet and who we're comfortable with sharing our truth, so when we make new friends, or new coworkers that we're
True.
cool with, or whatever, we're coming out again and again.
Yeah.
So for me personally, coming out was to the people that I felt safe with, and that was usually friends like outside of my Amish environment, away from the conservative mindset of my
Okay.
family.
Okay, that makes sense. So you started outside of that Christian circle, or outside of that Amish circle, which I guess, now that you're saying that, that makes sense to me too, because I knew that the further away it was from that circle, the better chance it was of having anybody understand.
Well, as I told you, like I was 5, and I told my parents I was going to grow up and marry a woman. And the torture that I went through for 15 years, which included child sexual assault,
Yeah.
beatings, physical harm, all kinds of things, I would highly not suggest doing that. But I was 5. I didn't know any better.
Right, yeah.
I saw a beautiful woman and I followed her around the shop and I wanted to grow up and marry her.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
still think women of that type are beautiful and attractive, and that's just the thing.
Absolutely.
So what happened is I tried to be straight after that.
Mm.
That did not work out so well.
I
so
am
I
just
had to come out again.
I'm so shitty at being straight. Like I'm not good at it. Like
Even my house is crooked. I'll let you know that right now.
Yeah, no, I can't get my head around it, you know. And it's so interesting that you mentioned that, Mary, because I don't think that I've come to a place in my thinking where I don't think that you have to be made gay for gay to be a valid identity. Like, I think if you were to choose to love who you wanted to love, that's valid. But I would like to point out that for myself, I also had an instinctual moment of attraction like that helped me understand my orientation. Part of my story is that I actually went through 3 exorcisms, and they were either really shitty exorcisms or they were so good. Praise the Lord, I'm a man. Right?
That's
totally works.
I love
right?
that.
Yeah, it totally worked. But I was at the mall right after the 3rd exorcism, and a beautiful woman walked by, and I just followed her with my gaze.
It was like, hallelujah.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that moment, I was like, I knew it. I knew that was, I didn't make that conscious choice to look at that woman. Like, that was the moment for me where I knew it was something late, like in my DNA on some level. So I don't think that has to be everybody's narrative, but for me, it was
there.
Yep, absolutely.
But no, so kind of like I lived as a straight person for a while. I ended up having a child. And when my child was small, one of my friends came out as what was it, gender fluid.
Okay.
And we had this very interesting conversation about it. And I realized that I am non-binary at that moment. I never really came out as that. And that's just been really interesting. However, pause. A couple years later, I ended up coming out as a lesbian, and that was a very different experience.
Yeah.
On one hand, I have a brother that is also not conforming to the Amish church, and when I started seeing my wife, he told me we're going to hell, and we basically haven't spoken since then.
Yeah.
And one of my now the people that I'm around in real life all the time, like those people were safe to come out to, and they were great and they were amazing. I came out to one of my other ex-Amish relatives, and she told every single born Amish person that I knew, and they all like deleted me out of their life.
Oh, yeah.
And so part of my journey is I want to make sure that if there are people that have this journey of like exploring their sexuality and their gender, and they happen to have been Anabaptist or Amish or Mennonite or Hutterite or Baptist, whatever, what have you not. Part of my journey is I want them to know they're not alone. There's life after that. And even if your community that you thought you had, that you thought was safe, disowns you again or shuns you again, you can still have a life after that and have a happy life.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, I don't want to talk too much about myself, but I'm having so many interesting thoughts here, because from what I understand of the Amish like experience of being shunned or shunning, like that's not an evangelical practice, but in practice, that's very much what it felt like for me, because I was so steeped in Christendom, and it's everything. It is your whole sociology. it is your relationships, it is, it can be your sense of vocation, it is your family, it is your friends, it is the places you shop. Like, it's, from what I understand of Amish life, it's very much kind of encapsulated, and that's how my experience of evangelicalism was. And so to come out wasn't just say, hey, I'm gay. It was like, you're going to probably lose it all, and I think that that's something that I was really thinking about in coming into conversation with both of you. James, what was your experience like coming out? Did you and Mary share proximity geographically, or did you meet later in life? And, like, what was your story a little bit like?
Yeah, we're both from here in the Midwest. I'm
Okay.
from originally from southwestern Michigan.
Okay.
And yeah, I met Mary later on. But yeah, it's like a specific example. See, I never had a problem being gay. It was everybody around me had a problem, and
Mm,
everybody knew before I did. Like, I didn't have the vocabulary, I didn't understand, but
yeah.
they knew.
Yeah.
And so an example of this, an example of this is, because the Amish are they're a closed community,
Mhm.
and there's I don't know, is it like, I think the population right now is what, 330,000 Amish. I could be off. I don't know,
It's
but
somewhere between 330,000 Amish to 500,000, I think, James.
Oh, wow.
If you
Okay.
look at the yeah, if you look at the Young Center for Anabaptist Studies, I believe it's somewhere
In the
in that number.
continental
in the
United
United
States, or the
States,
whole world?
United States, I think.
Okay.
the United States, yes. But anyways, so yeah, everybody knew I was gay before I did, and I have this distinct memory of going to the grocery store with my ex-Amish sister, and the Amish community is white. You do not see people of color
Mm,
ever, like
mhm,
ever. Maybe if you're in like Lancaster or Shipshawana or one of the Amish communities that really caters to tourists, you
mhm.
may, but no, for the most part,
Nope.
yeah, you
They're
don't. So
Okay.
anyways, I see my first black man, and he's beautiful and tall, and he looks like a basketball player. I mean,
Mhm.
and I'm staring, and my sister's like, James, close your mouth, stop staring. And that's an example of people knowing before I did, and it,
well,
it was
and
awful. Like,
Yeah.
and do people realize, like, do people realize, like, the kind of, like, the way that many Amish churches look at Black people?
No, feel free to share. My knowledge of, like, the Amish faith and culture is limited, and that's another reason why I wanted to bring you folks on. I was like, let's learn about, let's learn about this, but let's talk to some queers too. Like, let's do
Yes,
that.
yes.
Yeah, the Amish come from are literally from the 16th century, and that includes their worldviews on like everything.
Okay, so it
Uh-huh.
just pretty much just didn't evolve from there.
Right, right.
Yep. Um, did your community ever talk about Black people, James?
Yeah, I don't think we ever had that conversation, like, ever. Like, there
So
was
they
no
were just
reason.
non-existent, right?
Right, right. They were just the outside world, right? Part of the sinful outside world.
Right.
See, and my parents had told me that Black people were cursed with the mark of Cain.
No, I just read about. Okay, okay. Cool. I read this. I was
It's
tr-
awful.
yeah, I was trying to kind of learn,
It's
because I
awful.
understand that the Bible was used to justify slavery for so long, and so I was kind of trying to see where that came from, because I know preachers were preaching racism. It's not a new thing to the 21st century, in case anyone who wonders. They preaching racism now. They preached it back then. That's another episode. But there's the actual, like, they use that mark of Cain and mark of Ham, references from the Hebrew Bible, from the Old Testament, to justify slavery, and they're using biblical language to justify this, and that is just,
That's
it's
atrocious.
it's atrocious. It's mind blowing.
It's awful,
Yeah.
and it's so unhelpful. Like, for me, I had to learn about like cultures, and when I learned about different cultures, it really opened my eyes as to like we are all just human beings put
Yeah.
on earth, and whatever paths. Sometimes those paths may intersect, but
Mhm.
that's okay.
Mhm.
Sometimes those paths intersect for a while, and then they divide again, and that's
Yeah.
okay too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so what comes to my mind is like the Amish, the Amish are a people that are separated from their homeland because of
Mhm.
their immigration. Genetically, the Amish, they belong in the Swiss Alps, they belong in the French country, they belong in Europe. That's their original homeland.
Okay.
And when the people are separated from their homeland, it's generational trauma.
Mhm.
And the Amish do suffer from historical trauma, and their practice of non-engagement with the world,
Mhm.
that during World War II, when all the horrible things were happening,
Mhm.
the Amish literally stood by and did nothing.
Mhm. Yeah.
How is that even Christian? When you won't even speak up.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing is they use that conscientious objector term, and yet there's so much violence that happens in their homes and in
Mhm.
their that never there's never any resolution to it. And I find it like I have a really hard time wrapping my brain around this. It's like you're a conscientious objector and you have that conscientious objector status because you're Amish and that's what you do.
Mhm.
Um, but yet there's so much violence in the form of like domestic violence, child sexual assault, um, beatings, physical abuse, like just all kinds of stuff, and not to mention the psychological trauma and the
Mhm.
generational trauma.
Mhm.
I can't really wrap my brain around that. Like, how can you be a conscientious objector, but yet over here there's all of these things? Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
yeah, it would seem they would seem like very dissonant ideas, right? Like they don't connect. So you're like you're against that violence, but you're not against this violence. How are you drawing that line, you know?
Like, you're against yes, you're against that violence, but you're all for spare the rod, spoil the child, and children have died because of that theology.
Yeah. That that has to be an all-consuming like thought in your brain. Like how do you hold both of those things, you know?
I just don't see how it's possible. For me, it's impossible to hold those two thoughts.
Yes. I would have to say for me it is as well, especially when you think of like in terms of like talking specifically about like bringing up kids and stuff. Like for me that's a part of the conversation when we're talking about nonviolence. Like I can't tell my kid you can't hit somebody when you're mad at them, but then I'm going to spank you after you've done something wrong. Like those things are not separatable, especially in a child's brain, in my opinion. And if you're stuck in that sort of like just kind of cessationist worldview where you haven't had dialogue and friction around that area, of course it's going to keep existing, you know.
But yeah, so let me give you a scenario. So it's common practice to put a baby in a high chair and then they do a silent prayer before they eat. So
Uh-huh.
often they will like they'll even preach about this is they'll hold the baby's hands under the table on the high chair and while they pray, and if the baby removes their hands, the idea is that they should now spank the baby.
Mm.
And that's something, like I said, I can't it just can't reconcile, the two can't reconcile.
Yeah, absolutely not. Those things don't go together, right? They're a
No,
baby. Like,
that's a baby doesn't know any like they're developing, they're forming, they're like they just don't know.
yeah. I have a question. Is it in your lived experience, right, with your expert knowledge of being Amish that I simply don't have? You know what I mean? Would it be possible for someone to come out and retain an Amish identity?
What kind of delusions are you holding?
Yeah,
Well, I
no,
don't
it's
know
it's
because
a
see,
hard
sometimes like
no.
No.
there's like a movement of people who've come out
No,
and still want to be Christian, right?
no.
Is it completely incompatible?
Right now, where it is, and I just like had some really, yeah, nope. I was reassured that those lines are still there. There is everything is still present. They're still teaching directly against like sexual deviations such as homosexuality,
Mm-hmm.
and it is very much not possible for somebody to come out and still retain their Amish status. Like they might be able to still dress Amish and go to church, but they will be shunned.
Mm-hmm.
They will be an outcast.
And there's not enough of a cultural conversation around Amish LGBTQ people to like have a reclamation movement, right? Like there's not is there anything
The
from Amish life that you want to
conversation
bring
that
in?
they have around homosexuality is legitimately it's a sin and it's Satan attacking you, and
Yeah.
this is wrong. You're an abomination.
Yeah.
Right. The Amish have a really fundamentalist, black and white, unbelievably medieval outlook, in terms of religion, like Christianity. It's really, really, really old fashioned and backwards.
Yeah. So it's basically to the point where like I feel like some of Christianity and some of Catholicism and I would think even some of Islam, right? And Judaism are moving to a point where there's been enough cultural conversation that there are people who are like, nope, I'm Jewish and gay, or I'm, Muslim and gay, or I'm Christian and gay. And there are people who there's enough cultural conversation happening amongst those people to like
Hmm.
have a pocket. Um, and I'm wondering, like I always wonder, like, what is it about Christianity that I want to hold on to, right? Because there's something that I want to hold on to. Is there like, do you think that there's something from your Amish like existence that you would want to come together with other Amish people around, or for you is it just like this is just not me anymore?
You want to go first on that one, Mary?
I've struck a chord.
Okay, well, see, I learned how to cook, bake, sew, garden,
Mhm,
keep a house, etc., etc. But
mhm,
there's also like this extreme like anxiety about the housekeeping. I actually did a
mm,
podcast about that.
okay.
But as far as like, baking and sewing, I like being artistic.
Hmm.
It's a form of creative expression.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I recently have made a quilt that is kind of a come to, I don't know, I don't want to say a come to Jesus moment, but it's kind of like a reckoning. Like,
Right,
so the
right.
That's so
story behind the
beautiful.
quilt is that I had made a quilt with my egg donor when I was a teenager,
Mm,
and when I had become nonconforming, I had asked her for that quilt, and she gave me a quilt off a perpetrator's bed instead. And
mm.
so I always felt like I didn't deserve a quilt,
Mhm, mhm,
and I ended up having a conversation with a friend of mine who was like, you deserve a quilt.
mhm,
And I was like, I never even thought about this. Like, literally, because I sew. I really do enjoy creating things and sewing. That is a form of expression for me. I do paintings. Um, so I made a Lone Star Pride quilt.
ooh,
It's on
no,
our Facebook page. But that quilt, the background fabric is called Abandoned because that's something that happened to me,
mhm, mhm.
and it's perfectly imperfect.
Yeah, yeah. And quilts, like quilts are pretty symbolic, I feel like too. Like I'm not Amish, but for me, like my grandma makes quilts and like that was almost a part of like our family heritage, right? Like it's not like oh just a blanket, right? It's more
No,
it's much more, right?
well, you put something of yourself into that art that you're creating because it
Hmm.
really is art. Whatever you're creating, like you put so much energy into it and you put so much effort into it, and you have to find the right fabrics and the
Hmm.
threads and you know, all the things like
Hmm.
the batting for quilts. You have to have the right kind of batting, and then you put the binding on, and that's the final culmination of this quilt. It's currently laying on my bed, by the way, guys.
You totally deserve a quilt is a thing.
Yes.
You
And
do.
that's something that I've done a lot with, like embracing things that I really like. Like I love baking.
Mhm.
I will bake some really wonderful things that I really greatly enjoy, but they're really bad for me. So there's
Be
that.
right over.
I can't wait.
We'll sit under the quilt and eat baked goods and talk about being gay.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Right? It sounds like a party to me, man.
Oh, I would love that. Or we could sit out
And
back and build a fire.
listen to that worldly, sinful disco beat.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot all about the music.
Okay, you gotta watch out with the music. The devil's coming straight for you, man. In evangelical world, that they spun off this whole branch of Christian contemporary music, like it has its own acronym, CCM. And literally, for the goal was, especially in the early 2000s, for every Christian or for every secular band there was a Christian band that you could listen to. So it's like, if you listen to Blink 182, you should listen to MXPX, or like there was just all this.
Okay, so if you listen to Metallica and Slipknot, who should you listen to?
Well, they would have argued. They would have argued back in the day. It would have been like Skillet or Under Oath. There's some. I was in a Christian metal band. Like I was there. My kids are always like, "Did you scream Jesus?" And I said, "No, but I did scream Satan, I rebuke you" into the microphone. So. Yeah, I don't know, and it's weird. It's so weird because it was obviously just like a bastard version, but you could see that there was like an element of like, for me personally, I was like, I want to fit in, and I don't fit in. Like I don't have the cultural touch points. I don't. We didn't have TV, cell phone, or internet, and we could only call people that lived in our town, which was a town of 1,000 people. So I didn't have much exposure to the outside world, especially when I was in high school. I was mostly just church, youth group, school, you know what I mean? And that was it. And so I wanted to fit in and I wanted to have that cultural touch point. But in so many ways, evangelicalism kept me from that, you know? James, is there any is there any elements of like your Amish existence that you refuse to give up or that you want to retain, you know, even and make it hold it in both hands with your queerness? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, sure. The Amish, when you leave the Amish or you're not a part of the Amish, they take away your spiritual identity, really. And so for me, embracing my queerness, embracing my Amish identity, both of them equally, you
Yeah.
know, like Mary's talking about her artistic talents, quilting. For
Mhm.
me, it was writing.
Mm.
I remember struggling to look for like a book about gay Amish as a teenager, like not really putting it together, but kind of putting it together and not finding, of course, anything. But I did find Oscar Wilde and James Baldwin and Gore Vidal and Truman Capote and Tennessee
Mhm.
Williams and so many other, writers and poets.
Mhm.
And that was my lifeline. It's a public library.
Right.
So, you're born a writer. So, yeah, literature and one thing I like to point out to people is, when you look at like the canon of American literature, you don't find any Amish voices.
Right. Right. That's a huge problem even within higher education right now is the colonization of higher education, right? Like, are white people the only people that wrote shit down? Like, no, get yourself together, higher education. We shouldn't need a Caribbean literatures class. We shouldn't need an African literature class. It should be all a literature class, right? And so for you, it sounds like part of your Amish identity was just refusing to give up the fact that you were Amish, right? Like, I think that for so long, people wanted to argue if you could be gay and Christian, that they were missing the whole point. Because I was like, hi, like you can argue what you want to do about it. You can argue what you want to do about me. You can argue this, that, and the other, but you literally cannot say I don't exist because I'm here. Like I'm here, I'm Christian and gay, deal with it. Like, and for the longest time, that was the first phase of my coming out was like, oh, this is what I am. And I had to accept that. And then it was what I could do with it. But like, your identity is valid in so much as you fucking exist. I hope Facebook doesn't hate me down for dropping the F-bomb, but your identity is valid in so much as you're Amish and gay. Like, you don't know, they're forgetting that no one else has to approve of you actually existing because you exist, right?
Yep. Yep.
They're not there.
Yeah. And
Yes.
they're not. And maybe this is part of what you're doing, though, is you are able to say, hi, I'm Amish and gay. And then you know what happens? It's like you're at a family reunion, right? And like, I don't always, my family is crazy a lot of the times, but I'm still going. And so I always imagine that like I'm the crazy person that they wish wouldn't come back, but like I'm still here. I'm still your family and I'm still gay. Right? I'm putting it out there. So like, I'm still here and I'm Amish and gay. Like, do what you want. You can excommunicate me. You can shun me, but you cannot fundamentally make me not exist. Sorry, you don't have that power.
That's a fact. And
We're
that is
here and we're
why
queer, right?
Yep.
Right.
they don't own us. They don't
Right.
own who we are. And that's why I think James had shared a Facebook post about, or no, he wrote a blog about it because I attended an Amish abuse awareness conference
Mm-hmm.
and I went as me
Mm-hmm.
and I wore a suit.
Mm-hmm.
I covered all of my tattoos and, you know, I tried to be respectful, but if they could have kicked me out of a public venue, they would have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is I am me. You're not going to do this to me. It is a public place. I am allowed in public spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I am the public. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
And I'm Amish and I endured abuse. Come at me. You can dislike what I look like, but fundamentally I fit the criteria. Like, it's so interesting because as you folks talk, it seems a lot like I feel like every religion is on some process towards dealing with their relationship to queerness, and it just seems like your for Amish folks, it's as far back as Amish culture is, right? And so whereas in the early 1900s, if you really look, there were queer people coming out then as early, like there are queer people coming out, and so like the church is just now finally reconciling to that. So you folks are just a couple steps further back where you're like, I exist. That's where I'm at,
Yep. And people need to see us exist, James.
Mm-hmm.
They
And
don't own
you.
our truth. Right. That's really a great thing about the podcast is, for the first time we can have a public conversation, ourselves, and
It's really been so amazing to have this experience because I run a whole other podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
But having this one with James helping me with it and collaborating has been a really wonderful thing. The stories that we're recording, these people have went through a ton of different experiences, but fundamentally they all are finally like they're in a space where they feel like they want to be able to help and spiritually help people who are Anabaptists and struggling. And so I'm super excited. And every time we record an episode, I kind of am like, oh my God, can we release it like right now?
I do the same thing. This is why I do a live show, because I can't hold on to it.
Because I'm just like, oh my God, like I want to do this now. I want this information to be out there because people need to know.
So for our first episode, we did release one early, and it's an introduction to transgender people and how to be an ally. And we have a fab.
Yeah,
amazing.
I listened to that today as I was working out at the gym. I was like, I'm gonna do some listening here. So it was a great conversation, And I feel like that's the thing. That's the first way to dismantle bigotry and hatred and regression is to just exist, right? I think it's Audre Lorde who was a Black lesbian, And she said, my existence is an act of political warfare. And I feel like I hate
Yes, for
using
that.
war metaphors because Christians are so married to them, and it's just ew, gross.
Yeah.
Like, can't you do anything without fighting? But I love that idea where she said, just me existing, boom, like I'm just going to proudly exist. And that's the first wave of ripples outward. You know what I mean? And I think that that's what you folks are doing in the Amish and Anabaptist communities,
Well, we're trying.
right? It
And we're
seems
Yeah,
small,
we're
right? But you're
trying, but
doing
we
it.
definitely get, we don't get like a ton of like pushback, like in terms of just direct negative attention. But there's definitely a wall of silence.
Yeah.
And to those people who are just silent, here's what I tell you: your silence is deafening.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's to Desmond Tutu quote. One of my favorite quotes in the whole world is to remain neutral in times of oppression is to side with the oppressor, right? And so unfortunately, or fortunately, there's a bit of a reckoning. It sounds like, within the Amish community, like, are you going to be the one that just doesn't shun me? Like, are you going to be the one that just loves me, or are you not?
Around the issue for sure.
Right.
Well, yeah, I do feel, Mary, you can add on to this, but I do feel that there is a day of reckoning happening within the Amish communities. And it may not be, like an overnight thing, but
Mhm,
it's
Well, I feel like it's rising. It's
mhm,
coming. It's happening. It's going to happen anyways.
mhm.
Whether that happens in my lifetime or not, I don't know. I just hope we fundamentally have laid a solid groundwork for that to continue happening,
the dawn.
and it will happen. It has to happen.
I mean, if you think about a spiritual community of the size of your community, what we're saying, like between 300 and 500,000, like you are going to be able to make bigger changes within the Amish world than I could ever make within Christendom, right? If you just look at me as a percentage of the whole, you're a bigger percentage of a smaller whole. And I feel like the work that you're doing has to be like absolutely groundbreaking just by existing, right? Because you're a way bigger part of a way smaller whole, which gives you more impact. And it's not, it probably, I can guarantee 100% it's not going to be fun because it's like never, we never get to do the fun shit. Okay. That's why we get a parade, because the rest of it is just slogging through the shit.
Oh my God.
But you're doing it, like you're doing it right now. And I'm really encouraged by what you folks are doing. Like, that's just awesome.
Well, I just think that it is possible to be spiritual. It is possible to be religious. It is possible to be at some form of spiritual peace and still
Hmm.
be queer, LGBTQ, whatever it is,
Exactly, it
and
is.
accept yourself. And it takes a
Right,
lot
right, right.
of self affirmations for me. I do a lot of self affirmations and writing and all of that, like, because it really helps me be okay with who I am.
Yeah. Well, especially when you grew up in an environment where you were told just you aren't. It wasn't even an explanation or a conversation. It was just you aren't. Like, they were just gonna, you're just not gay. You just
Yeah.
aren't. And so you have to continually allow yourself to be validated in all of the complexities of your
Yep.
identity, right?
Yep. And I always say this about people is everybody has different spiritual journeys.
Hmm.
And what fulfills one person may not fulfill somebody else. But here's the thing is when you find things that fulfill you, as long as it isn't hurting somebody else,
Right. Yep.
do them.
Do
Who
it.
cares? Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Right,
the
right,
person
right.
that has to be at peace with yourself when you go to sleep at night.
Hmm. Hmm. Is there anything that, and this is all of these questions that I throw out are open to either of you because I'm really genuinely curious. Is there anything that you miss from your Amish identity that you feel like you can't have now that you're queer? Because I know for me, there's a lot of things that I miss, and I don't miss the reason underneath them. I am not in that space theologically, but if I hear a certain hymn, like I'll still get goosebumps. You know what I mean? If I hear a song that was important to me when I was young, regardless of the fact that I theologically am not in the same place, like that's still my heritage. And part of where I'm at right now in my own healing is like, yep, that's mine. Can't take it from me. You know what I mean? Like the church can be whatever they gotta be, but the fact of the reality is I can still cite the doxology backwards and forwards, and I can sing it as well with my soul off the top of my head. You know what I mean? And that's mine, and no one can take it. Is there anything about like, you know, that your upbringing that you kind of have that connection to, even if you're not still in that place, you know, anything that you miss or love or you want to retain?
Right. Right. Um, well, I guess for me it would be, you know, within the Amish, there's various types of Amish, and there's
Right.
like the old order Amish, and there's even more conservative branch of Amish known as the Schwartz and Schubers. But my father was like it's like seven generations or something, but you know he was a direct descendant of someone, you know, one of the founding fathers of the Amish, you know. And so for me, my father's family, who I got to visit when I was really young, and I heard like the Swiss yodeling
Mhm.
and the Swiss dialect spoken, and there was a lot of, you know, a certain fun-loving camaraderie, I guess,
Mhm.
and that sort of stays with you over the years, you know.
For sure. For sure. I have that same sense of like, I miss that camaraderie, right? Like, I don't miss what we were all coming together around, but like, I miss youth group, or I miss, you know, like dinner after church. I miss seeing these people that I cared about on knowing I was going to see them every Sunday. Like, there's something about that that's part of who I am, you know, and I do, like you said, it gets in you young and you do miss it, right?
Right. So, but I do have a fun postscript for you, which is that my first book, The Literary Party Growing Up Gay and Amish in America,
Mhm.
it's a collection of poetry. Um, it is housed, a paperback copy is housed at the International Museum of Friendship in Switzerland.
That's so cool. That's
That-
so dope. How did that happen?
Well, when they first founded, they were asking for submissions, and you know that's my heritage. So I made the connection, and yeah, they have my book and a poem at the museum.
That's
That's
so
awesome.
cool, man. Also, when we get to the end, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about your book, so keep that in your brain. Is there anything like coming to your mind as we're talking about this, Mary?
Let's see. The idea that you can have a community that would get together and do quiltings. But here's the thing is like the quiltings were really, they were gossip this.
Mm-hmm. Hey, we
You
all
know,
love sometimes like we love a gossip fest. Why do we like Real Housewives? Why do we like reality shows,
I
right?
know, right? But like it's really dumb. But I miss the quiltings.
Yeah. No, that's not dumb at all because see, I think to me, I think what people don't realize, I think Amish folks might realize this because of the totality, right, of your
Hmm.
society. But I think that people don't realize how much um, these things that we do as a part of religion are also our culture. So, like for me,
Yes.
I don't know what ethnicity I am. I have no clue. I asked my parents, and they were like, "We're white," and I was like, "That, bro, that's not a thing." Like that's not a thing. Race is a social construct, whole nother video. But like where did we come from? And I have a real sense of disenfranchisement because like I want to know my heritage and I don't know. And so for me, the church culture is my main cultural touch point. And so
Yep.
for me, that's why it was such a big kick to the nads to have to
Yeah.
leave that, right? It was like a kick to the nuts. Like you can't have, not only can you not come to church in the future, but you can't even have your past. And so I've spent 10 years learning that I can have as much of my past as I want.
Mhm.
Man, I hope you find the gayest quilting circle ever. I hope you find that. I hope you find the gayest quilting circle that's like, you're Amish and gay? Cool. Pull up a needle. You know what I mean?
That would be really cool. I've actually been talking about making a quilting circle with some other people, but like
Yeah.
we all live in various parts of the country, so that would be like logistically a nightmare.
Just like, no, I got it. It's a Zoom-based
We can do a Zoom quilting
Yeah.
circle.
It's
Ha!
a Zoom-based bitch and stitch. Amish welcome. I think that those things are so important, though, because at the end of the day, Mary, you had tipped your hat earlier before we started recording about having experienced going out and experiencing different religions and how there is so much similarity, right?
Yeah.
And I've come to refer to myself as spiritually non-binary, which I'm making it up. It's me. If anyone else uses that, you got to pay me, right? But I've come to refer to myself as spiritually non-binary because, like, I can appreciate these beautiful touchstones of culture and morality and arts and language and music that come from different religious communities. And I think it's beautiful instead of scary, you know?
Liam there.
Yeah.
I think yes, that was so beautifully said. Thank you so much for for putting that out there because I can completely relate to that. I can walk into a synagogue or a
Yep.
mosque or a Catholic church with a certain sense of wonder and awe, and
Yep.
there's no barrier between me and my own um personal relationship with the divine.
Yes, absolutely. I will not give that up. And I've talked to people who are or who are atheists, and I don't feel any disconnect there because we can still talk about those ethereal, intangible things that connect us. And like some of the most beautiful moments that I've had was a couple years ago. I was working for the newspaper in town here, and I got to do a photo series, and then I got to write. I was actually a photojournalist, so I didn't get to write all the time, but I did a photo at a series and a series of articles where I went to during the Holy Month. I went to a Jewish Passover Seder. I went to a Ramadan, like a breaking of the fast at the local mosque, which is it's a miracle we have a mosque in a town my size. It's very small. But then I also went to a Catholic Easter service and an evangelical service, and I wrote about all of them. And that integration of them to me felt so like holy. And that was a big part in my sort of deconstruction from evangelicalism, was like, yeah, it's all connected. It's all connected, you know? And I respect that our cultures are different, but we really do have a lot to major on that's similar.
Have you ever heard of a book called Lost Connections by Johann Hari?
I haven't. I'm feeling like I should.
I really love the book because it delves into like what do humans desire and what causes like depression and anxiety and etc. And it's a feeling of disconnect. Like we humans need to be connected, and it kind of talks about that.
Yeah.
So I really have enjoyed the book. I've listened to it on Audible a couple times now, but it's been really helpful for me.
I need to look into that. I currently am working on, like I mentioned, I'm hoping to do my PhD in queer theology, and I've already started. So don't take this idea or I'll bite your fingers off. Anybody, that's not just to you guys, like anybody. But
Oh,
I want to write a book about the idea of queering church
some
because
people
there
might
is
enjoy.
right. They might. But I'm not here to judge. But I want to write a book about the idea of queering church because there's something that draws humans over and over and over again to these ridiculously flawed
You could start.
institutions.
You could start with John Donne sonnets. That would
Okay.
be good.
Okay.
Um, no, but like I think you make me think of Oscar Wilde and his letter De Profundis, which is
Mhm.
a free ebook you can get online, and it's a letter he wrote to his lover when he was in prison, and it's from the depths of his soul, and the writing is so beautiful and so powerful and so moving. It's
Yeah.
this meditation on grief and beauty, and it completely destroys me every time I read it. So De
Yeah.
Profunda by Oscar Wilde, just throwing that out there.
I'm gonna have to check that out. There is, to me, there is something. There is this. intangible thing, right? Or this something more than just natural, right? That exists. And people somehow crave that. And it doesn't fit in the same words that I used to understand it in, but it still exists, right? Like, look at us right now. We come from super different backgrounds, right? I always tell people I double fisted the Christian Kool-Aid. Like, I just double fisted it, right? And you guys grew up in a very cloistered, like Amish setting, and we're still having a conversation about the same thing. Like, if there's no more proof needed than that to me, that there's something tying us together, right?
Yeah, that's because humans crave that feeling of connection.
Yeah.
And when you can find a common ground to unite on, that's when you feel connected to people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you feel united in your efforts, like you're not alone.
Yep.
And that makes you feel less loneliness. You suffer less from loneliness.
Yeah. And I think
Right.
that for people coming out of really cloistered environments, that is essential.
Right. I went from looking for a book on gay Amish to having instant group conversations with gay Amish. I mean, how amazing is that?
Yeah, seriously. Like, that is like an act of like holy revolution, if I can be allowed to use those terms.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Let's talk about how blessed we are today. Because, James, haven't we talked to more ex-Anabaptist and gay or queer people in like the last month than we have ever talked to?
Ever. Yeah.
Ever.
You know, we're finding ourselves. We are.
Yeah, that's huge because like you're not alone. Like the Amish church can say whatever they want to say, but you're like, literally look at us. We're here and there's more than just two.
You got kicked out too. That's cool. Come join our game.
Right, exactly.
We got your back.
Yeah, and suddenly it's like all of a sudden you go from a man with a flag to a man with no flag. And that's a disorienting thing. But for you to be able to, in whatever level, give people their flag back that's a spiritual practice, right? That's well, you might not know, you might know it, you might not, but like that's pastoral, right? That's the aspiration of any social work right there, is to give people their flag back, right? And you're doing that. Like, I really can't wait to hear the stories that you guys have, because I feel like this is a completely untapped field, you know?
It is. And you know, like going back to like I said about like, you know, no Amish and American literature, like, you know, you go to any bookstore and you're gonna find a ton of books written about us, but not by us.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about the books written about us.
Yeah, please do.
Don't get me started on the romance novel.
Much like James,
I can't even.
I looked for lesbian Amish stories.
Uh-huh.
None.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
None. And if you're out there and you're listening to this and you are an Anabaptist lesbian or an ex-Anabaptist lesbian, please contact us. We would love to have you on our podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at least have some kind of lesbian representation.
Yeah,
we would really, really, really love you. But anyways, so I did not find any. There is nothing. And because of James, there is the poetry aspect and some letters and stuff that is out there for ex-Amish gay men. But I haven't found much or like anything at all about lesbian stuff. And that is really saddening to me, because I'm a big reader and I love reading.
Yeah.
I've read over 100 books this year.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. And that's it's so interesting that you say there's a lot of books written about us, but not by us. And I feel like that's, you know, very characteristic of the colonizer mentality, and of this like idea of the doctrine of discovery that started Christianity, was like, we're going to come in and tell you about yourselves, you know, like we're here to save you.
All about you.
Exactly.
I know all about you.
Exactly.
And you know what? This is, James, I'm gonna get you started.
Don't get
I
me started,
second
Mary.
that.
Don't get me
The
started.
romance novels.
Girl.
Okay, so here's the thing about the romance novels, and it is literally written by these. Beverly Lewis is the most popular one. She is so famous, and she's written all these Christian novels about the Amish people, and they're like so awful because then what happens is like you get people who read these books and they're like, I want to be Amish. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
So,
Well, you
okay,
don't really know, homie.
yeah, you know, the whole genre is really really sad and badly
oh my
written,
God.
and
Yeah.
I can't.
I just,
It's
and it's all
There's
fiction.
no artistic value. There's no artistic value.
No, there's no
No.
artistic value. It's all fiction. And another thing that people do with that is they will say, well, your story is not really true because that's not what it says in my novel that I read.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you're confusing facts with fiction.
Yeah. And that's
And if you really want to verify my story, I can give you the link to the registered sex offender list, the court cases, et cetera, et
yeah.
cetera. Go ahead. Be
Yeah.
my guest.
Yeah. Like, hi, actually Amish here. Like, I don't really think you get to debate me, right?
I don't think, yeah, exactly like that.
Do you think that there is an element of, so there really are books about Amish people, there are documentaries about Amish people, but I don't see them coming from Amish people. Do you think that, right, like, do you think is it a technology thing? Is there no desire to be known by the outside world? Like, what is it that keeps that disconnect?
Well, the Amish separate themselves from the world. First off, like they call us English people, or like me and
Right.
James are abgefallene or abgangene or wir sind fortsprungen, which all of it just means that we're either what is that word? Apostates or runaways.
I'm an
Right,
apostate too. Good job.
Yes.
okay, so you know the whole thing about joining the Amish, like you're not Amish, but you want to join the Amish. This is the easy answer, okay? Is that you know you can follow all the rules and you can comply with the lifestyle and the belief system, and you can officially join the church if you put in the dedication and work that they want from you for this. However, if you're actually not genetically Amish, you will always be held at a at a distance, and you will be treated differently.
Mhm. So it's not like there's not a rush of conversion to the Amish lifestyle.
No. And there's a social structure where like, there's what do we call it? The ladder, James? Like there's the people on the one rung of the
Well,
ladder, and
there's the
these are
hierarchy, you
that's
know.
those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Like I'm that Mary Byler. I'm gonna let you know that. I'm
Right.
that.
Yep, that guy. So it's almost like there's no desire to chronicle a history of your community that extends outside of your community, correct?
No.
Well, a lot of times, artists, whether you're a writer or a creative person, you need tools and you need
Mhm.
education, and the Amish don't really have higher education. They don't have art class.
Okay. Okay. So there's a lot of those sociological pieces that are missing to empower people to tell their stories, even if they wanted to. And then there's not really a desire to be understood by the English, right?
Yeah.
That's
Something like
well
that.
said. I had not heard that said that way before, but yeah, there's not really a desire to be understood by the English world.
Yeah, because I feel like some communities do want to be understood to an extent.
Here's the thing. This is what I tell people. Now you're going to get the whole spiel.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
So, yes, being Amish is a religion and a way of life, and it's culturally my heritage. It's my child's heritage. It's affected my child because they not only shun me, they shun my child. I think that's harmful to my child, and that's unfair because my child does not deserve to be shunned.
Yeah. Yeah.
My child's never done anything to deserve to be shunned.
Right.
Facts. But not only do they have all of those things, They're also a branding.
Right.
They're a business. And it's
Right.
all about the money. So they want the outside world to understand them enough to make sure that they can continue making money. There's
Mhm.
Amish people that are millionaires and billionaires, like they're literally insanely rich.
Mhm. Mhm.
And those are the people that can get it. They're up here on the social structure. Like this
Right.
ladder, they're all the way up here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
would you agree with that, James?
I would, and I would also say that there's a lot of financial inequity among the Amish, and there's the haves and the have-nots, and
Okay.
there are some Amish that literally get by on what they make on their roadside stands selling vegetables.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not really a net of like social services at all.
No.
Okay.
They go to the church and ask for help if they need help, and then the church will make sure you don't starve. But I can attest to that not being actual food
Yeah.
with appropriate nutrients for growing children.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, that doesn't even seem like it should be the church's job, like, unless you have a nutritionist on staff. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like the centrality of the church within Amish culture, right? Because Amish is more than just a religion. It is a whole lifestyle, but it seems like everything kind of
It's
centers on and springs out of the church.
yes.
Yeah.
And so,
Right.
like, you
Right.
know, the ministry will decide whether or not somebody can do something, or like if the church can like go over here and talk to the, like if this member can go over here and talk to this person or
Mhm.
whatever. Like they try to, there's an extreme level of authoritarian control.
Did This is a historical question, and if you don't feel comfortable answering historian type questions, that's totally fair. But so Amish, like, as a religion, started in, you said, like, in like the area of like Switzerland, and then came
Europe.
over to America? Does it still exist in other parts of the world, or does it just exist in America?
Um,
Well, it's okay. So yeah, the majority of early Anabaptists immigrated. There are a handful that did not, and I
Okay.
believe that they are known as maybe just German Baptists or something. But they're similar to what we would have as the Mennonites.
Okay.
I don't know if they follow a certain dress code, and I know that in Europe they have higher education, so
Okay.
there's probably some differences there. Um,
I was
there's
just.
a
Oh,
there's a settlement of Amish on Prince Edward Island,
okay.
um, but for the most part, they're in the United States. Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering what the interaction was between, like, conservative Anabaptism and Amish identity when it came to, like, the idea of the separation of church and state. Because in early church history, like, Constantine decriminalized Christianity. And then, oh, I'm blanking on the name of the emperor after him, but the emperor after Constantine made church and state the same thing, right?
Right. So
But
also the early Anabaptists were persecuted because they were the radical heretics of
mercilessly,
the
from
day.
what I've read, right?
And they were persecuted by both the Catholic Church and other Protestants who felt that the Amish, the Anabaptists went too far. They were too radical.
Yeah. So you got the Anabaptists and the Amish faith were essentially getting hit from all sides in terms of, like, the Reformation. Because I did a class on church history this semester, so I feel competent in having this conversation right now because it's fresh in my brain. But I was reading about, like, the Reformation, and then the Catholic Counter Reformation, and I was wondering if the Anabaptists were in either camp there, or if they were genuinely just, they're just off this direction.
Well, the Amish church was founded by one person, and that was Jacob Ammon.
Okay.
And he had a disagreement with other Anabaptists of the day over the issue of shunning, which he believed in and they did not.
Okay.
If it was not for that disagreement, there would be no Amish. They would
Okay.
be all Mennonite.
Okay.
mm-hmm.
So that's where that branch off of that part of the tree came from.
Yes.
That makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes.
Okay, cool. I was just curious, as someone, like I said, as someone who's just like, I'm genuinely just a nerd about religion and culture and how stuff forms into stuff, and so it's really interesting to me. It's also really interesting to me that where I live in Western New York, there's actually like a large Amish population around where I live. And I know nothing really.
I was born 12 miles south of Jamestown, New York.
What? You were born so close to where I am. I'm only like 45 minutes from Jamestown.
And I can tell you that that Amish community is really conservative. They're
Okay.
in line with the Schwartz and Amish community and the fact that they don't even have sleeves on their dresses. They used to have separate tops with sleeves that had the. I just yeah. And then
Damn.
and then the skirts on the dresses had to have like 3 tucks on it, which I've never understood why you had to have 3 tucks on the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And I could go on and on and on about the craziness of it. But anyways, my grandma lived there. She was great. She was amazing. Um, I've I've often been told that I'm just like her.
Aw. That's
Yeah.
Well,
there's something
Mary,
so like that, like so special
Mary,
about
Mary,
What?
you know what they say, don't you?
Dynamite
three.
comes in small packages.
No, they say they say 3 tucks, no fucks.
James.
No, I love it. I love it. I love it. That's part of the authentically queer and Amish part of this
Yep.
conversation. Like we
Yep.
got to bring both.
It really is. So let me tell you about my grandma a little bit because this is funny. To me, it's hilarious that
I'm ready.
because it was supposed to be an insult to call me like my grandma.
Hmm.
Because she was my biological father's mother. Okay, and her and my biological mother did not get along.
Oh.
Okay, my grandma was 4'11".
Mm-hmm.
She had over a dozen kids, and she could make a grown man cry without lifting a finger. She never weighed more than 100 pounds. Like from what I remember, she was this small little lady. But whenever I would do something, my egg donor would always tell me that du bist grad wie die Äpfel. And really, truthfully, that's a compliment when you think about it, because she was a defiant Amish woman. She
I love
wasn't
that,
supposed to.
Mary.
Like, I literally just sat in a conference where the question was asked, why don't you have victims speaking at this conference? And they answered it by saying that men were created first and women shall be silent. That's what it says in the Bible.
Oh, the Apostle Paul. That guy, man. Oof.
So
He gets all the attention, really.
Oh God, I can't even with Paul.
there's
Like
so much more to the Bible than just that.
Well, then Paul. Oh gosh.
There's so much more.
Yeah, I mean, like Mary Magdalene was there's this strong evidence that she was like a disciple, and that's just been cut off through church canonization processes. Like God is described as female at least 50% of the time. Like why? Oh man, the church is trying to cut off that matriarchal power, but your grandma was like, not today, Satan. But in your, do you speak Dutch? Is that what you're?
Pennsylvania Dutch.
Pennsylvania Dutch. I thought so. Okay, so in Pennsylvania Dutch, she said, "Not today, Satan."
Not today. And also, she's the one who brought me into this, where she delivered me.
Oh, that's so cool. Look at
Yes.
that. You have some sort look at there is an Amish feminist queer streak coming through for you.
Yep.
Coming through.
She used to do, yeah. She
Go ahead.
used to do stuff that would like grossly, like it would piss people off. Like my parents used to get so mad because like we go over for Sunday dinners, and so you'd have like 12 families of like however many kids, right? All of them except 2 would have kids, right? And so you'd have like 100 kids running around. And what grandma had is she had a candy room, and she would line the children up outside of the candy room, and we all got to go in and have a little time to select candy from grandma, and she'd have a little conversation with us. It was really just, it's one of my fondest memories
I
today.
love that. I love that. Look at
I
that.
love that too.
But it used to piss off our parents because now you have 10 hyper kids.
Right, right. And it's just like exponentially more based on all the kids that are there. That's
Yep.
great. Well, friends, I have to wrap up our session for today, but I am just insanely interested to see where your project goes. I want to ask just one last question. Like if everybody that's watching was only going to remember one or two things, right? And I want both of you guys to answer this. What would you want people to remember from this conversation?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I guess I would want everyone to remember that the gay community is comprised of a lot of various groups, including the Amish,
Mhm.
and that we are all fighting and striving every day for equality.
Yes. All of us together. No, like that is all of us. You cannot be a proper queer and then try to disavow the other. Like that's just antithetical.
Yeah, we all exist.
Yeah.
And I think we all exist for a reason.
Mhm.
And it's okay to embrace yourself and be proud of who you are and love yourself for who you are.
Mhm.
And if you're creative, please embrace that too, because, creativity can really give you a lot of joy and peace in life and
Yeah.
help you figure out your spirituality too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that diversity is something that we should celebrate even within our own identities, right? Like I am not just one thing, I am all of these things and that's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to cut off my hand to please my foot, right? Like I am a whole being, right? I love
Yep.
that.
Yay.
Last thing I would like for you folks to do, if you could drop the information, James, if you could drop the information on your literature, and then also if you can drop the information on the podcast, just one more time, I'd like to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you guys and your work.
Well, you're going to be able to access videos through a YouTube channel
Okay.
or on Facebook. There's the Plain Rainbows Facebook page.
Okay.
LGBTQ Amish and Anabaptist stories. And there's also a website affiliated with it is www.themisfitamish.com.
Okay. Awesome. I
Yep.
will make sure. Oh, go ahead,
And
James.
oh, I was just gonna, yeah, just for me, my blog is literaryparty.blogspot.com. You can
Okay.
find me on Twitter or Instagram at Queers Poetry. And yeah, Plain Rainbows on Facebook.
Awesome.
Oh, one more thing. I forgot. It will also be uploaded to Spotify and all other a lot of podcast platforms.
Okay, awesome. Fantastic. I will make sure to put all of that information in the show notes for this video, like in the caption on Facebook, and then also in the YouTube and the podcast form. We'll make sure to get all
Thank you.
those links out. It's important work. And I always say this about conversations, like we have to spread the word super far because it's a smaller population that we're trying to reach. And so we've really got to saturate and get our conversations and message out there as far as we can so that we can reach those honestly queer people who are isolated at the corners of their own existence and think they're the only one. That's who we've got to get out to, right? The people that feel perpetually othered. So I look forward to helping you guys spread your podcast. I love talking to both of you, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Happy Pride, everyone.
Yes, happy Pride.
Pride.
Almost our month.
Seriously, No, I'm just kidding. We gotta wait until June 1st.
Yeah, right. We gotta do it. We gotta do
Gotta
it.
do it.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
I look forward to hearing from you guys. I'd love to have you back on in a year or so just to see how this has grown, because I have a feeling that it's a very needed and it's going to be water on very dry soil. So I'm excited to hear back from you guys in a little bit and touch base. So everybody who's watched, thank you so much for watching. I will make sure to share this information, all Mary and James's contact information on the Conversations official page. And I would ask that you please do them the favor of liking and subscribing on every possible medium, because I know what a difference it makes to a new podcast and to a new YouTube channel. Subscribes, likes, and follows will get our message out there. So please go and follow Plain Rainbows. Also, We'll be back here every week. I'm going to switch our conversations to Monday evenings to see if we can reach a few more folks. So I will see you guys regularly for our regularly scheduled shenanigans 7 days from now. Thank you so much. And please remember that everybody's voice is welcome at the conversation. Have a good night, Mary. Bye, James. We'll see you guys later.
This has been the Conversations Podcast. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions or comments, or just want to get involved, feel free to join the conversation on social media. You can find us at Conversations Official on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And please don't forget to rate, follow, and share this podcast. We're available on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for joining the conversation.